All right, so we've covered the basics of Judaism for the most part, and now I'd like to turn to the mystical aspects of Judaism, which is my personal favorite. And I don't know how well you can see this. I know it's a mirror image, but this is from Gnosis magazine, and this was part of their imagery dealing with the Kabbalah, which I found absolutely fascinating. And so I want to share the screen with you, and we'll go back to that jewfac.org site. Nope. Can you guys see that? Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if you'll notice, we're now in the advanced area. When we were looking at the basics of Judaism, it was beginner, and now we're going into the advanced. And in fact, it was kind of advocated that you shouldn't even begin to study the Kabbalah until you had read through and understood the Torah. So Torah comes first. That lays the foundation. But Kabbalah is kind of like this union with the one. It's the mystical aspect of Judaism. And this is my personal opinion on Kabbalah. I believe it's very similar to what happened in medieval Christianity, where you had a wedding of Platonic or Neoplatonic thought with Christianity that provided the theology through the Middle Ages. And here we have Neoplatonic or Platonic thought wed together with like fundamental Judaism or Orthodox Judaism. So how fascinating is that? There's also, I believe, Gnostic elements in the Kabbalah, because you see lots of hierarchies, this idea of hidden, secret, mystical knowledge, almost this like ladder climbing approach to be reunited with God. All right, so let's go through this briefly. I'm actually going to pull up an image while I read some stuff for you, and you can tell me if you can see this or if I have to reshare. Can you guys see that okay? Do you see the 10 Sephirot?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so first of all, I don't know if have we defined what mysticism is yet in this class? If not, I should have.
But that could just be me.
Okay, well, would anyone care to take a shot at it? What is mysticism? Or what is a mystic? When you hear those words, what does that conjure up in your mind? Monks in dark robes and dank abbeys off on some mysterious crag in the wilderness, some hermit in the deep, deep desert, some wizard or witch. I mean, what does mysticism conjure to your mind?
I think of like obviously like mysticism is not like corporal or like physical. It's like ethereal. It's like very like supernatural. It doesn't like pertain with anything that's like in the world, but like the things that are unseen that like we can manipulate or use to determine like things.
That's really good, Ryan. Thank you. And we have mysticism in all the religious traditions, which is so fascinating to me. I think even in naturalism, materialism, we're starting to get mystics. I don't even know how that's possible, since they don't believe in they're trying to have some sort of weird materialistic spirituality. Maybe that's the next step of evolution. But anyways, you can have Buddhist mystics, Hindu mystics, Jewish mystics, Muslim mystics, Christian mystics. And if I had to define a term that would include them all and wouldn't exclude any of the mystics, like a generic term, I would say a mystic is seeking direct union with the one. And I'm using one instead of God because that kind of includes Buddhists and Hindus and others. But the one for the Western traditions, of course, is either Yahweh, God, or Allah, depending on your language of origin. So this idea of seeking union with God in the Kabbalah, and let me get a running start first, and I want to share with you the Kabbalah creation account. So in the creation account recorded in and the Kabbalah, by the way, it was written between the 7th and the 14th centuries AD, 7th through 14th centuries. But some people believe it was begun, at least the oral tradition of it, all the way back to the Tower of Babel. So that is super fascinating to me. And they see it as like this underlying current that traveled throughout the Jewish tradition. But it was formally written down in the 7th through 14th centuries. And it's not a single book, kind of like the Bible. It's a collection of a lot of different books put together. And the heart of the Kabbalah is the Zohar. And we actually have a copy of the Zohar. It takes 5, I think it's either 5 to 7 volumes to just for that one book. And we do have that in our college library if you want to check it out in the 200 section. You'll know you're getting close when you hear the hum. On the old campus, that was my favorite room, the caveat room. And I would just go in there with all these old theology books and religion books. And that's where I found the Zohar. And it's full of Jewish tales, proverbs, edicts, creation accounts. So let me get back to that. So in the Kabbalah, if you remember, the first act of creation, they take very seriously and literally the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And they take that to mean God is the totality of reality. There is nothing that exists outside of or beyond God. God is it. And I agree absolutely 100%. But since God is the totality of reality, if he wants to create something, the only place to create something is within himself, because there is no outside of God. It's one of the fun things I like to tell my students is one of the things we can do that God can't do is God can't go outside. Which cracks me up because he's already there, right? There is no place where God is not. And so he can't really go anywhere because he's already there. Anyways, for God to create the world, he had to create everything within himself, not here's God here and the creation down here. No, it's all totality of reality is God. So that first act of creation where God separates the light from the darkness, God is pure light. And so he actually had to create like a cosmic womb within himself that he shrouded in darkness. So inside of God himself now we have light, the pure light of God, but see, he can't create in that venue because the glory is so intense that as soon as he made something, it would be consumed by his glory. So he had to create this kind of like safe place within himself, this cosmic womb, which he shrouded in a veil. And that is where space-time is taking place because God dwells in eternity. Time has no meaning there. And I can't tell you how revolutionary that was to my thinking about creation and God and immanence and transcendence. And I absolutely am in love with this Kabbalistic model of we are actually within God right now. The whole world, the whole cosmos, the whole universe. Now, they're very clear. Creation is not God. It's something God made within himself, but all creation could be destroyed in a single stroke and God would not be diminished in the least. So that's very different from pantheism, where if you destroyed creation, you would destroy God, basically. So this Jewish mysticism, it sees God as one. We are created within God. And then in that place, that's where we get the dualities of light and darkness, good and evil, black and white, male and female. We get time, we get space, we get movement, we get measurement, all these sorts of things taking place within this safe place God has made inside of himself. And when I go out into the desert, I love the desert because the stars are usually exceptionally good there. I think it might be because of the low humidity. And I like to imagine, and this is just a metaphor, I'm not a flat earther or anything, but I like to look up at the heavens and imagine them as like a ginormous black curtain covering the sky. And the stars are like pinpricks in that curtain, and they're letting through little bits of the glory of God. And if you could take and rend that veil, that curtain away, and instead of just having pinpoints of light coming through, it was pure light from the glory of God. I think that begins to give you an inkling of what we're talking about and why God had to make a place within himself that would not be consumed by his glory. So back to the 10 Sephirot and the Kabbalah. God wanted to interact with his creation. He didn't want to just be this like deistic God, the blind watchmaker who makes the world, sets the laws of nature in motion, and then just kind of lets it go. No, God is super interested in the works of his hands, and he wants to interact. But if God just came down into that safe place, he would fill it with his glory and he would consume all of his creation. It would just go right back into himself, basically. And so this is like a divine transformer. And I'm just so geeking out about that. Just like if you have a certain power source that is too high and you plug a device or appliance into it, it would fry the circuits. You have to have a transformer to tone down the energy flow that's going into your device if it's not made for that high flow. And so that's exactly what these 10 Sephirot are. And I believe all of these are mentioned in Second Chronicles, which is really interesting. And so basically the glory of God, if you imagine this cosmic womb within God, God wants to get in to that womb, into that creation. He wants to interact with it. So he uses this transformer to actually tone down his glory so that he can interact with the world without consuming it. All right. I'm going to read a little from here. I'll stop share screen for a second. Isn't this fun? Oh my goodness. This is my favorite part of Judaism. It's funny too, because the Kabbalah has become kind of like a pop sensation in America among like certain celebrities like Madonna and other people. They're all into the Kabbalah and the Jewish. And it's just like, okay. All right. So the Kabbalah. The Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, the earliest known writings, the 3rd through the 6th century AD, believed to have been given to Abraham. Emphasis is on the creation of the world. So that was that creation account I told you from. The 10 Sephirot equal numbers, 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And I think I showed you guys that chart the other day of how each Hebrew letter also had a number. It has an astrological sign. It has an animal. It has some sort of value or virtue. So the Zohar, the heart of the Kabbalah, is called the Book of Splendor. And it was edited by Rabbi Moses de Leon in the 13th century. 13 volumes of biblical commentary and rabbinic tales. These writings are attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the 2nd century AD. Many believe it is actually Moses's work. The Zohar is the central Kabbalistic teaching text. And so once again, the Kabbalah itself is like a small library. It's a collection, but this is like the core, the central aspect of the Kabbalah. Like you can go to Barnes and Noble and places, and they'll sell you like the essential Kabbalah, but it's like they've just taken bits and pieces and put it into kind of like an anthology. And it's worth getting. It's very interesting. That's where I learned about the creation account, but the Kabbalah itself is quite extensive. The Kabbalah affected the Italian Renaissance. Christianized Kabbalah was a synthesis of Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and magic. This eventually led to Rosicrucian and Masonic schools of thought. Fascinating. As well as occultic revivals in Europe. The Rosicrucians, so interesting. And if some of you still need to do a project, we have Rosicrucians here in San Diego. And it was kind of like a revivalist movement, kind of eclectic, kind of new age, where they would take different bits and pieces from different traditions, but they were really into like almost like a Egyptian revivalist movement. So they have lots of Egyptian gods, scarabs, statues of things like that. And for whatever reason, in coastal North County, especially like Encinitas, and north of there along the coast, a lot of Rosicrucian members, you can still see it in their buildings, in the architecture. And there is a Rosicrucian retreat or temple grounds up in Oceanside. With the COVID, I don't know if you could visit at this time, but you could at least do it virtually, maybe on, do a Google search of Rosicrucians. All right, anyways. Did you catch that, though? Also influenced the Masons and the occult. And you see that in Masonic lodges, right? That you enter in, as an acolyte, and then the more you're involved and engaged, it's like you're climbing these ladders in this hierarchy. And in each step, you get more and more of the hidden esoteric teaching until you finally get to this place where you can transcend back into godhood. The Kabbalah was popularized among the Jews by Baal Shem Tov, 1698 to 1760, the founder of modern Hasidism in Poland. And those videos I showed you last class of them chanting, "We want Messiah now," or "We want Meshach now," those were Hasidic Jews in America. All right. All right, let's go back to the 10 Sephiroth. Are the 10 Sephiroth back up? Anybody?
Yeah, they're up.
Okay, thanks, Penelope. Okay, Ein Sof and the 10 Sephiroth. Ein Sof is like the name for God that it's all encompassing, I think, beyond description. God is one and transcendent. He cannot be described or contained. This quality is called Ein Sof, which means without end, the one without limit, the one without boundaries. No boundaries of time or space because of the transcendent nature of Ein Sof. It cannot directly interact with the universe, but does so through 10 emanations from his essence. These emanations are known as the 10 Sephiroth. Fascinating. And so remember, an emanation is different from a creation. A creation, you have a creator and the created. An emanation is like a fountain or a furnace. And the closer you are to that fire source or the heat source, the more heat and light there is, and it radiates through the room. And that's basically what's happening here. At the top, it's almost full radiation of God's glory, but as it's transformed down through these different channels, it tones down the glory aspect. All right, so here's the 10 Sephirot and how they correspond to different qualities of God. The top one is Keter, which means crown. The second one, hopefully I'm not butchering these words too badly for my Jewish listeners. Hakama is wisdom. Bina is intuition. 4, Hased is mercy. Gula is greatness. Number 5 is Guvara, which is strength. 6 is Teferet, which means glory. 7 is Netzach, which is victory. 8 is Hod, which means majesty. 9 is Yasad, which means foundation. And 10 is Malkut, which means sovereignty. And you can find all of these qualities in 1 Chronicles 29:11. And if you notice, these are showing both the masculine and feminine qualities of God, at least from a human context. What our culture would see as masculine and feminine, you see in the 10 Sephirot, God has both justice and mercy, right? Okay. So this is called the Jewish Tree of Life. And I got another picture here. I love this one. A little more stylized. So we have this Jewish Tree of Life. The Sephirot connect with everything in the universe, including humanity. The good and the evil that we do resonates through the Sephirot and affects the entire universe, including God. So this is like a two-way transformer. We can interact with God from the dimmed down part, and as we interact with that low vibrational frequency of God, it will magnify as it goes up the tree of life and then connects to the Creator. And the same way, if God has feelings or intentions towards man, it will radiate down through the tree of life and then be dispersed through the world. I love the imagery here of, well, obviously it's a tree, so they already had me at tree imagery, but this whole idea of God like pouring out his glory coming down from like the top and then out through the roots into the cosmos. And I really enjoy that imagery. So out of the fullness, out of oneness, into particular or particularity. Okay. The divine light poured orderly into the first 3 spheres, but then like a rushing torrent, fractured the remaining spheres, mixing good and evil. The last sphere, Malkut, represents the Shekinah, the presence of God. These are sparks of divine light contained in all things. And let's go back to that other image. Is that the 10 Sephirot again? Yeah. Okay. So what the Kabbalah teaches is God, excited to interact with his creation, pours down through the first 3, but then it's just like a torrent and it just causes havoc and flows into the world. And what happens is now we have a mixture of light and darkness in the world. It's not just pure light anymore. And so the job of the Jewish people is to gather up the light, reject the darkness, and gather together the light. And if any of you saw that Russell Crowe version of the movie Noah, a lot of evangelicals hated that movie because they're just like, this isn't the Genesis account. Well, it wasn't based on the Genesis account. It was based on the Kabbalah. The director or producer of that movie is really into the Kabbalah. He also did the movie Pi, the mathematical symbol Pi, which is also deep in Kabbalistic tradition. And so I really enjoyed that movie personally because it portrayed a Kabbalistic view of the universe. And if you remember when they did flashback, well, the opening scene is Noah grubbing around in the muck and they're mining like chunks of light, like mineralized light. And that was like the fuel and the power and what the people craved and desired in that movie. And then when they flash back to the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve did not have physical form. They were spirit beings living in the world, and they didn't get physical bodies until they disobeyed God and the curse. Fascinating. So when in Genesis it says humans were clothed in the skins of animals, well, this is your animal skin right here. It wasn't the skin of like a camel or a bear or a goat. It's this. This is your animal skin that you were clothed in, because before that you were a free spirit being, but now you're trapped in a mortal body. But that's some of the Gnostic teaching that kind of crept in to these teachings. It freaks me out all the time when I get up early and I go in the bathroom in the morning and I look in the mirror and there's like a wild animal in the bathroom with me, and then I realize it's just me. Remember John 1? Jesus is the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Did you catch what I was reading, though? This most toned down version here, that's the Shekinah. Do you guys remember what the Shekinah is?
Isn't it like the glory of God?
Yes.
Like the Shekinah glory?
Yeah, where do we read about that in Scripture? How is it described? It's also shown in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, wasn't it the thing, like in the temple, God would be over the ark, like in between was it the cherubim or something? I don't remember what type of angel. But is that thing?
That's it. And basically, if you looked upon it or touched it, you would die immediately. That's God's dimmer switch, is instant death if you gaze upon it. Now, if you're a Christian and not a Kabbalistic Jew, we have one more dimmer switch. And who is that? We would add one more rung below the Shekinah. And what would that be? Or who would that be?
Or the Holy Spirit?
No. It's the one that allows us to truly interact with God without being consumed.
It'd be Jesus, right?
Jesus. We got the Jesus filter. And so we can have an intimacy with God and closeness that even these Kabbalistic Jews, I don't believe could achieve. And I know I've come out of character and I'm talking like a Christian now, but I couldn't help it. I still love this so much. But as a Christian, I believe we have one more rung in the transformer, which allows us to freely interact with God without fear of being consumed by his holiness and glory. How are we doing time-wise? I better move it. The 10 Sephirot of the task of mankind, specifically the Jews, is to gather up the divine sparks to heal and mend the world. In doing so, the Shekinah, the bride, will be reunited with the Tetheret, the sun. Holy cow. Every person has a specific task to fulfill, and each individual can affect cosmic harmony for good or evil. It's almost, think of it like a ripple, because everything has a cause and effect, right? If you have a bad day at work and your boss calls you a loser, and then you come home and yell at your wife or your husband, and then they go and are short with the kids, and then the kids kick the dog, and then the dog bites the cat, and then the cat nips the hamster. And it creates this ripple chain of badness because of the boss being unpleasant. And in the Kabbalah, it works that way for good and evil. just like maybe smiling or letting someone go ahead of you in traffic on the on-ramp, it could create a ripple of good deeds that go out off into eternity. But the same thing, unkind look, a judgmental attitude, stinginess, all of that could cause a ripple of untold evil that could keep going throughout eternity. And this is part of a lot of people have a problem with the concept of hell, with this idea of how could there be eternal punishment for temporal sins? I mean, humans at best maybe have 120 years to sin. I mean, for the longest lived among us, right? And we're going to torture that person forever in eternity. But when you start to think about the ripple effect of sin, it's not just the sins that person committed, but they have created a ripple of evil throughout the cosmos that has eternal consequences. And so there's eternal punishment. That's the best philosophic answer I can give to why there's a eternal punishment. Okay, where was I? When enough Jews practice tikkun, the Messiah will return. Many Kabbalists, especially Lurianic, teach that there are 70 hierarchical arranged yet interpenetrating worlds. Did you catch that? 70. This is only one of 70 chains. That's how far removed God is from us in his glory. And even in the 70th removed chain from the glory of God, the lowest it can be toned down is the Shekinah, which is just this blinding, devastating glory of God on earth. Okay. I'm going to share 4 of them with you. And unfortunately, I don't, this came from my Gnosis magazine and I can't find it online. So hopefully you guys can see this. So here's our 10 Sephiroth we're using, but over on this side, you can see there's 4 stacked ones, not 70, but we're going to talk about these 4. And so these 4 is, the top one is Azalut, world of emanations, pure divinity. The second, and think, oh, I'm collaging this with my philosophy class. We did John Scotus Erigena, and he has almost an identical layout of the nature of reality, but from a Christian perspective. Baria is the world of creation where distinctions begin to appear, such as archangels. So it's still, we're talking very high level. Yetzirah is the world of formation, archetypal patterns, matter, Hebrews letters, realm of angels, and it's like the Platonic forms is the third one, is like the realm of Platonic forms. And then finally, Asiya is the world of action, effort, mostly parallel to the material universe. And this is associated with the cherubim. Okay. And this is not, I don't know why I put this quote in here, but I'm going to read it because it's so good. This is like from a Christian mystic, and I threw this in here with the Kabbalah, but the quote is, "The eye with which man sees God and the eye with which God sees man is the same eye." Think about that for a minute. There's a passage in, I believe it's in the Proverbs, that where God is saying, we, those who believe in him, are the apple of his eye. But the Hebrew can also be translated as pupil of God's eye. We are the pupil of God's eye. Think about that, people. When I first heard that teaching, my whole perspective changed. I realized that when I was walking around and viewing the world and interacting with other people, the very God of creation was looking through my very eyes. seeing the world through my perspective. When I watch a beautiful sunset in the evening and I'm just overwhelmed by it, God is watching that same sunset through my eyes. Holy cow. It's just so wonderful. I can hardly stand it. Any questions, you guys? We've got 8 minutes. What I'll do for you, if any of you want that stuff from Ed Dickinson on how to talk to Jewish people or how to tell them about Jesus from the Old Testament, I'd be happy to. Like I said, I only have a print copy. I need to get some. Maybe I'll get someone at the school to make a digital copy so I can just post it up in the class and you guys can copy and save it if you want it. But Ed just loves the Jewish people, like I said, and he knows Hebrew, and he's just so excellent. Like that passage I shared from Isaiah 53 with you last class. He's just so excellent and gentle and loving, and wants them grafted back in. And that's how he sees it. Thoughts, comments? Did this stimulate any new stuff for you guys? I was just blown away when I was first introduced to Kabbalah, and I think there's incredible value in a lot of it. You can also see how it could get all culty too, right? Are you saying something, Ryan?
I'm trying to. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Let me just pop the share.
For those like people who are, I guess, readers of the Kabbalah, like what place does that hold in comparison to like Scripture? Do they like take them side by side, or like does Scripture have like a bigger, I guess, place?
It's kind of, picture it like climbing a ladder or making stairs to God. So the Torah would be foundational, but then you would have the Tanakh, the rest of the what we would call the Old Testament. Then you would have mystical teachings like the Kabbalah. So I wouldn't say the Kabbalah trumps the Torah, but it's supposed to be like a continuation and a building out of it, because they're trying to use these as like stepping stones. And that's the Gnostic element and the Neoplatonic element, almost like that climbing your way up to God through different practices, rituals, meditation. But for these people, it's mostly through knowledge, kind of like the Hindus, right? That was the ultimate way, even more so than devotion, was actually understanding, and not just intellectually, but existentially. Anyone else? Comments, questions? What did you think about the creation account? Oh man, I just blew me away.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest. That was kind of crazy.
I mean, the downside, of course, with mysticism is it can lead to a lot of superstition, fear, that whole wards against evil, wards against the evil eye. And that's where you see a lot of, in Middle Eastern cultures and stuff, you'll see amulets and wards against the evil eye all over the place. And it's just the strangest thing to me. But I do like the idea of it has such a high view of God. And anything that expands my view of God just really, I appreciate. And this just made God much bigger for me than he was before. And I just so love the idea that it is in him I live and move and have my being. Literally, I am in God right now. And I believe that is true. That God is not somewhere in outer space where he's prepared a place for those who trust him and obey. But we're actually within the very being of God. We are not God, but we are within God. We're not external to him. And that point of view is what I would call panentheism, to distinguish it from pantheism, where all is God. In panentheism, it says all is in God. It's a subtle but profound difference. Okay, y'all, I better get to my next class, but I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll probably do the critique of Judaism and Islam together, because they're very similar in their disputations with Christianity and the problems they have with Christianity. So we will start Islam when we get back. You don't have to come in. I'm not going to do any live streaming during Thanksgiving week, but I am going to post a video I would like you to watch before we meet again after Thanksgiving. All right. Have a great break, you guys.